What if everything you've been told about Africa's place in the Bible was wrong? For centuries, people have debated where black people fit in biblical history. Some claim Africa is barely mentioned in Scripture, while others misinterpret the curse of Ham as a condemnation of an entire race. These ideas have shaped history, culture, and even how people see themselves. But what if the real story was different? What if the Bible actually affirms Africa's significance, not as an afterthought, but as a central part of God's divine plan? What if some of the most powerful civilizations in history had their roots in Noah's descendants? This is not just about history, it's about identity, faith, and truth. It's about correcting misconceptions that have distorted the biblical narrative for generations. In this video, we will uncover the true origins of the black race, not based on opinions, but on scripture, historical records, and biblical genealogy. To understand the beginnings of the black race, we have to go back, way back to the days after the Great Flood. The Bible tells us that Noah had 3 sons, and through them, the entire world was repopulated. Shem, the ancestor of the Israelites, Arabs, and Middle Eastern nations. Japheth, the father of the European and Northern peoples. Ham, a name meaning warm or burnt in Hebrew. He became the father of some of the most powerful civilizations, nations that played a key role in biblical history. Here's what many don't realize. Ham's descendants spread across regions including Egypt, Ethiopia, Libya, and Canaan. These places are central to many biblical events, yet their connection to black history has often been misunderstood or even deliberately erased. But today, we're going to set the record straight. This is more than just history. It's about faith and identity. And if you've ever wanted to understand how Africa fits into the Bible, this video is for you. So before we dive into this powerful revelation, make sure to like this video so more people can discover this truth. Subscribe so you never miss an episode of Biblical Discoveries. Turn on notifications so you stay updated when we drop the next deep dive into Scripture. Now, let's begin our journey into the lineage of Noah's sons and see how the Bible itself reveals the powerful origins of the black race. After the flood, Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the ancestors of different nations. According to biblical genealogy, their descendants spread across various regions, forming the early civilizations recorded in history. Shem's lineage is linked to the Semitic peoples, including the Israelites, Arabs, and other Middle Eastern nations. His descendants are traditionally associated with the lands of Mesopotamia, Israel, and parts of the Arabian Peninsula. Many significant figures in the Bible, including Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, descended from Shem. The Semitic lineage played a central role in biblical history, particularly in the establishment of the nation of Israel. Japheth's descendants migrated northward and westward, forming the populations of Europe and some parts of Asia. His lineage is often associated with the Indo-European nations, including early Greek, Roman, and Scythian civilizations. Over time, Japheth's descendants expanded into regions that would later be known for their influence in philosophy, government, and trade. Ham's lineage is significant in understanding the early civilizations of Africa and parts of the Near East. The meaning of his name, often interpreted as warm or burnt in Hebrew, has been associated with a darker complexion. Ham's descendants settled in regions that became known for their powerful kingdoms and cultural contributions. The Bible records that Ham had 4 sons. Cush, associated with the ancient regions of Ethiopia and Nubia. The kingdom of Cush is mentioned throughout the Bible, particularly in connection with rulers and warriors. Mizraim, the Hebrew name for Egypt. His descendants established one of the most influential civilizations in history, known for its architectural achievements, governance, and interactions with biblical figures such as Abraham, Joseph, and Moses. Put, connected to North Africa, including present-day Libya, the descendants of Put were involved in trade, maritime activities, and cultural exchanges with neighboring regions. Canaan, whose descendants inhabited the land later promised to Israel. The Canaanites played a significant role in biblical history, often coming into conflict with the Israelites. The descendants of Ham established civilizations that played an essential role in biblical narratives. The Cushites were known for their military strength and connections to Israelite history. The Egyptians were central to the biblical accounts of Abraham's travels, Joseph's rise to power, and Moses leading the Israelites out of bondage. The Canaanites, despite their conflicts with Israel, were among the early builders of cities and trade networks in the ancient world. Historical and archaeological evidence aligns with the biblical record, showing that these regions were home to some of the earliest and most advanced civilizations. The influence of Ham's descendants is evident in early architecture, governance, agriculture, and written records. The migration patterns of Noah's sons shaped the development of societies across Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Ham's lineage, in particular, contributed significantly to Africa's historical and biblical legacy, a fact often overlooked in traditional teachings. Understanding this genealogy provides a clearer picture of the biblical nations and their place in world history. The Bible records that Ham had 4 sons: Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Each of these sons became the ancestors of civilizations that shaped early history. Their descendants settled in regions that played important roles in the development of trade, governance, and cultural exchanges. Many of these civilizations are mentioned throughout the Bible, highlighting their influence on biblical events. Cush is associated with Ethiopia and Nubia, regions known for their strong and prosperous kingdoms. The Cushites were known for their military strength, advanced agriculture, and complex trade systems. The Bible mentions Cush multiple times, emphasizing its connection to Israelite history. Some interpretations suggest that the Queen of Sheba, who visited King Solomon, may have had Cushite ancestry. Sheba, located in the region of modern-day Ethiopia and Yemen, was a wealthy kingdom that maintained extensive trade relations. Cush's most famous descendant was Nimrod, who is described as a mighty hunter before the Lord, Genesis 10:8-9. He is traditionally associated with the foundation of Babylon and Nineveh, 2 powerful cities in Mesopotamian history. His legacy represents early urbanization and the expansion of human civilizations. Mizraim is the Hebrew name for Egypt, one of the most well-known and enduring civilizations in world history. The Egyptians are credited with building monumental structures such as pyramids, developing early writing systems, and establishing complex governmental institutions. Egypt is frequently mentioned in the Bible, from Abraham's travels to Joseph's rise to power under Pharaoh. The Israelites later lived in Egypt for centuries before the Exodus led by Moses. The legacy of Mizraim's descendants extends beyond Egypt. Some scholars believe that various ancient North African tribes, including the Berbers and other indigenous groups, have links to Mizraim's lineage. The Egyptian civilization influenced both the biblical world and surrounding cultures through its trade, political alliances, and innovations. Put is traditionally linked to Libya and other parts of North Africa. While the Bible does not provide extensive details about Put, historical records suggest that his descendants played a role in early trade networks and military alliances. Some biblical references mention the warriors of Put serving as mercenaries in various armies, demonstrating their reputation for combat skills. The region of Put was strategically located, allowing its people to interact with both Mediterranean and African civilizations. Canaan's descendants settled in the land that later became the land of Canaan, located in modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Syria and Jordan. The Canaanites were known for their advanced fortified cities, maritime trade, and religious practices. They developed an early alphabetic writing system and established commercial networks that extended across the ancient Near East. The land of Canaan became central in biblical narratives, particularly regarding God's promise to the Israelites. The Canaanites frequently interacted with the Israelites through warfare, trade, and diplomacy. While many biblical texts describe conflicts between Israel and Canaan, the Canaanites also contributed to cultural exchanges that influenced Israel's early development. The migration of Ham's descendants shaped the course of early civilizations, contributing to architecture, agriculture, trade, and governance. Their legacy is deeply embedded in world history and the biblical narrative, emphasizing their role in shaping societies across Africa and the Near East. Understanding the significance of these lineages provides a broader perspective on the origins of some of the world's most influential civilizations. The descendants of Ham played significant roles in the development of early civilizations. The Bible, historical records, and archaeological findings highlight their influence in governance, trade, warfare, and cultural advancements. Their contributions shaped the ancient world and continue to impact historical narratives today. The Kushites, descendants of Cush, were known for their influence in trade, military strength, and governance. The Kingdom of Cush, which flourished along the Nile, became a center of commerce, connecting Africa with the Middle East. The Kushites established strong political systems and military forces that engaged with neighboring nations. The Bible frequently references Cush, particularly in relation to Ethiopia and its influence in biblical events. The Ethiopian eunuch in the Book of Acts is an example of how the region played a role in early Christianity. The wealth of Cush was largely derived from gold, spices, and other valuable resources that made the region an important trading partner with Egypt and other nations. Historical records suggest that Nubian rulers had strong political ties with Egypt, at times even ruling as pharaohs. Their military capabilities made them formidable allies and opponents in conflicts across the region. Nimrod, a descendant of Cush, is described as a mighty ruler and the builder of early cities such as Babel, Erech, and Nineveh. His name is often associated with the origins of powerful Mesopotamian civilizations. Some historical traditions suggest that Nimrod played a role in constructing the Tower of Babel, an event that symbolized early human attempts at unity and defiance against divine authority. His legacy represents early urban development and the establishment of organized societies. The descendants of Mizraim developed Egypt, one of the most recognized civilizations in world history. Egypt's advancements in architecture, written language, and centralized governance made it a dominant force in the ancient world. The construction of pyramids, the use of hieroglyphs, and the organization of early religious and political structures reflected their intellectual achievements. The Bible depicts Egypt as both a place of refuge and hardship. Abraham traveled to Egypt during a famine. Joseph became a high-ranking official under Pharaoh, and Moses led the Israelites out of captivity. Egypt's interactions with biblical figures highlight its importance in biblical history. Some scholars believe that various ancient North African tribes, including the Berbers and other indigenous groups, have links to Mizraim's lineage. Egyptian influence extended into neighboring regions, shaping trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchanges. Put's descendants occupied regions in North Africa, particularly Libya and other surrounding areas. The Phoenicians and Carthaginians, known for their naval power and trade dominance, are sometimes linked to Put's lineage. The Bible references Put in several passages, particularly in military contexts, where they are described as warriors and mercenaries. Their role in the armies of powerful nations highlights their military expertise and strategic importance. Canaan's descendants settled in the land later known as Canaan, which corresponds to modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Syria and Jordan. The Canaanites were known for their advanced urban centers, maritime trade, and complex religious practices. The Bible records numerous interactions between the Israelites and the Canaanites, ranging from conflicts to cultural exchanges. Cities, such as Jericho, Sidon, and Tyre, were significant in trade and commerce. The Canaanites developed one of the earliest known alphabetic writing systems, which later influenced the development of Phoenician and Hebrew scripts. Their contributions to maritime exploration allowed them to establish trade networks across the Mediterranean, connecting them to ancient Greece, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. The Hittites, Amorites, and Jebusites, who were also part of the broader Canaanite population, are frequently mentioned in the Bible. While they often opposed Israelite expansion, their cultural and economic influence left a lasting impact on the region. The migration of Ham's descendants shaped the development of early civilizations. The kingdoms of Cush, Egypt, Canaan, and North Africa played vital roles in shaping world history through their advancements in architecture, governance, agriculture, trade, and warfare. Their influence extended across Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. The contributions of Ham's lineage are often overlooked in traditional narratives, but biblical and historical records confirm their significance. Their role in developing ancient societies, from Egypt and Cush to Canaan and North Africa, demonstrates their impact on world history. The so-called Curse of Ham has been one of the most misinterpreted passages in biblical history. Many have falsely believed that this curse was placed on Ham himself and used it to justify racial ideologies, particularly regarding African descendants. However, a closer examination of the biblical text reveals that the curse was not on Ham, but on his son, Canaan. The passage in question is found in Genesis 9:20-27. After the flood, Noah planted a vineyard, became intoxicated, and lay uncovered in his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his brothers, Shem and Japheth. Instead of dishonoring their father, Shem and Japheth covered Noah without looking. When Noah awoke and learned what had happened, he declared a curse, not on Ham, but specifically on Canaan. Cursed be Canaan. The lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. Genesis 9:25. This passage has been misinterpreted over the centuries. Some claim that this curse was applied to all of Ham's descendants, including the nations that would later form in Africa. However, the Bible never states that Ham himself was cursed, nor does it extend this curse to all of his offspring. During the 18th and 19th centuries, some used the misinterpretation of this passage to justify slavery and racial discrimination. European and American slave traders wrongly suggested that Africans were divinely cursed through Ham. This distortion of biblical teaching was used as a theological basis for oppression. However, biblical scholars and historians widely reject this false teaching. The curse was only upon Canaan and his descendants, not upon all of Ham's lineage. The Canaanites later occupied lands in the Near East, not Africa. Their conflicts with Israel are well documented in the Old Testament, particularly during the conquest of Canaan led by Joshua. Africa's prominent role in the Bible. The Bible highlights African nations positively. Ethiopia, Egypt, and Cush were all involved in God's plan. Moses' wife, Zipporah, was a Cushite, and the Ethiopian eunuch was among the first Gentiles baptized in the New Testament. God's universal plan. The Bible teaches that all nations are created in God's image, Genesis 1:27, and that salvation is available to all people, Galatians 3:28. The curse was not perpetual. Nowhere in the Bible does it state that the curse of Canaan was to continue for all generations. The Canaanites were eventually absorbed into other cultures, and their fate was tied to historical events rather than an ongoing divine judgment. The belief that the curse of Ham applies to all black people is a historical distortion with no biblical foundation. The Bible does not teach racial superiority or inferiority. Instead, it emphasizes unity and redemption through Jesus Christ. Any teaching that promotes racial divisions based on Scripture is a misrepresentation of biblical truth. Correcting this misconception is essential in understanding the Bible's perspective on race, history, and God's purpose for all nations. The biblical origins of the black race have often been misunderstood or misrepresented. A closer look at Scripture and history reveals that the descendants of Ham played a significant role in shaping early civilizations. From Cush in Egypt to Canaan and North Africa, these nations contributed to trade, governance, warfare, and cultural advancements that influenced the ancient world. The misconceptions surrounding the so-called Curse of Ham has been used throughout history to justify false teachings about race. However, the Bible clearly states that the curse was placed on Canaan, not Ham, or his other descendants. Nowhere in Scripture does God condemn an entire race of people. Instead, the Bible presents a message of unity, equality, and redemption for all nations. The history of Africa and its people is deeply intertwined with the biblical narrative. Many biblical figures interacted with, lived in, or came from African regions. Moses married a Cushite woman. Jesus' family found refuge in Egypt, and the Ethiopian eunuch was among the first Gentiles to accept the gospel. These examples highlight Africa's importance in biblical history. Understanding this historical and biblical context is essential in reclaiming a truthful narrative. Rather than viewing history through distorted interpretations, we can embrace a broader and more accurate understanding of God's plan for all nations. The Bible emphasizes that all people are created in the image of God, Genesis 1:27, and that through Christ all are united. Galatians 3:28. The history of Ham's descendants is not one of condemnation, but of resilience, influence, and divine purpose. What are your thoughts on this history? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. If this video has provided valuable insights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so that more people can discover these biblical truths.